The Adventure of a Newcomer. Chapter 11, in which Ethelred takes more rope than Devereux had counted upon. "Well, here's the rope," whispered Ed Devereux, stooping and raising a large coil from beside the trunk of the tree near the eastern wall. "Just keep quiet a minute while I tie an end to this tree." It was a dark night. The cold had grown more intense during the past 24 hours, and the wind which came whistling through the trees set the teeth of the four chattering. "Are you sure that the rope will reach all the way down?" asked Ethelred. "Sure and certain, with 10 or 12 feet to spare." "There now, the rope is tied safe." "There's a light down there in the street," objected Ethelred, peering over the wall. "Of course there is," said Haynes, who was standing beside him. "That street is a part of the town, even if it is deserted, and the light comes from an old-style lamp-post half a block away." "You had better go," urged Earl. "The bell for the end of recess will ring in a few minutes, and it's no use standing here and freezing to death." Ethelred gazed down again, despite the glimmer from the lamp-post. It looked very black and mysterious beneath. He regretted that he had determined to descend by a rope. "Look here, maybe that rope isn't sound. It might break." "If it does," said Eddie, "we'll give it to you for nothing." "I don't care about risking my neck. Say, Eddie Devereux, would you mind climbing down just to see how it goes? Next thing, you'll want me to run away for you. If you don't hurry, your hands will be so cold and numb that you won't be able to use them. Go on yourself, or give up. We can't stay here much longer." "I don't know what to do," whined Ethelred. "Very well, darling," said Eddie. "Then I'll unfasten this rope, and we'll all go to prayers," said Eddie. And Eddie made for the tree. No, I'll go. Goodbye, everybody." The three took a strong hold on the rope. Ethelred mounted the wall with no little trepidation, caught the coil, dropped over, and then all was silence, save for the labored breathing of the three boys above and the noise of shoes scraping and knocking against the stone wall. A minute passed before they heard Ethelred's whistle, the agreed signal that all was well. On pulling up the rope, they found that it lacked about 20 feet of its former length. Ethelred had taken it away as a souvenir. "Well, that's what I call mean," exclaimed Eddie. "We're well rid of such a boy," commented Earl. "He has no sense of decency." Roger Haynes was chuckling. "It's one of you, Eddie," he said at length. "You might have sent the boy off by the back way, but you would have this romantic climbing down by a rope. The joke's on you. That rope belongs to the gymnasium, and you'll have to pay the damages." "I don't mind the expense," said the rueful Eddie, "but it's getting found out that bothers me. I'll lose my privilege for good conduct, although my conduct has been perfectly proper. In assisting Ethelred to leave, I consider myself as a benefactor to the college." "Yes, he's a good riddance," said Roger. "But there goes the bell. Good night, boys. I'm going to take a run. Ears and toes and hands are beginning to freeze." In the dormitory, the prefect, shortly after night prayers, noticed the absence of Ethelred, and he darted an inquiring look at Earl's direction. Earl, in common with the majority of the students, was on his knees. 2 or 3 minutes later, when he had risen, the prefect came over. "Earl, do you know anything about Ethelred Preston?" "Yes, sir. Where is he?" "By this time, sir, he ought to be on board the cars for home. There's the engine whistling now. He's run away, sir, and I helped him." The prefect shrugged his shoulders and returned to his place. "That's the end of Ethelred Preston so far as we are concerned," he thought. But he was greatly mistaken. Once Ethelred touched the ground, he was himself again, which he immediately proved by cutting off as much of the rope as he could reach, hurriedly coiling this about his arm, and wondering what he should do with it. He walked smartly down the street in the direction of the depot, and now Ethelrod began to repent of his new acquisition. He had taken the rope instinctively, but what was he to do with it? To throw it away would be wasteful. If he could but trade it off, wear it only for a collar button, he would take it. Thus, lamenting, Ethelrod reached the station. "Evening paper, sir, the Star," cried a tiny youngster, whose face was hidden by a tremendous comforter. A bright idea struck Ethelrod. "See here, Johnny, how many papers will you give me for this rope? It's a splendid rope and worth at least 40 cents. "I don't want a rope." "You could hang a man with this," urged Ethelrod, "and the rope would be as good as new. Hold on, don't go away. What evening's paper have you got?" "The Star and the Post." "And how much are they?" "Star is 3 cents and the Post 2. Take the whole rope for 5 cents. Give me a Star and a Post, and we'll call it a bargain. It's a splendid rope." "All right, sir, I'll trade." "Couldn't you throw in an extra Star?" "You said 1. "Come, throw in 1 more copy," he pleaded. Eventually, Ethelrod entered the station with 3 evening papers. He paid 70 cents for a second-class ticket, and having 12 minutes to wait, seated himself and took up the Evening Star. He had been reading for several minutes when he suddenly gave a low whistle. With mouth agape and protruding eyes, he read and reread a certain news item of about 30 lines. "This beats Jericho," he exclaimed, and dropped the paper. He fell into a study. An hour later that night, a card was handed Father Edmunds. He glanced at it. "What?" he said. "I thought that chapter was closed," and he threw the card on the table and hastened to the parlor. It read, "Master Ethelrod Preston, Albany Villa, Brighton, at home Tuesdays." Chapter 12, in which Ethelrod gets religion and turns over a new leaf. "Well, sir, what do you want now?" Ethelrod was standing in the dimly lighted parlor, fumbling with his hat. "I've come back," answered Ethelrod. The president turned up the light and fixed a stern glance upon the runaway, who lowered his eyes and gave every evident sign of extreme nervousness. "Come back for what, Master Preston?" "I'm sorry I ran away." "Yes, but running away here subjects the offender to expulsion." "But I only went as far as the depot. Then I began to think. It would burst my mother's heart if she knew that her boy had run away and been expelled." The president was puzzled. The runaway before him had the appearance of a worthless boy. The reports concerning him from prefects and teachers were to the effect that he was as worthless as he seemed to be. But now, to square all this with the letter from his mother, the testimonials from the mayor of Brighton, and from the pastor of the Episcopalian church? "It was because I didn't think, sir, that I ran away. I got red hot when my mother sent me here, and I made up my mind to be as ugly as I could, but I got religion down at the depot. If you let me come back, I'll turn over a new leaf. You don't catch me monkeying any more." These words of Ethelrod, vulgarly couched though they were, satisfied several of the president's difficulties. Had not Mrs. Preston stated that her son was likely to act first and think afterwards, to take the leap and then look? And had not the mayor of Brighton warned him that the boy meditated running away, and the bad points to be looked for in the boy's character had been verified? Was there not a reasonable hope, especially in view of Ethelrod's confession, that the good ones were now to come into evidence? The president felt that he was at length beginning to understand the strange character before him. "Well, Ethelrod, I will give you one more chance to redeem yourself. I now receive you, but conditionally. To be frank, despite the high character your parents enjoy, you do not seem to be at all up to the standard which we require of our students. Your ways and manners and views are such as we find in those whole associations are of the very lowest. I used to go with our coachman all the time, said Ethelrod, looking gratified. Indeed. Well, you must mend your manners without delay. You have already given offense to the boys here by your profanity. If I hear anything of that sort again, you shall go at once. I'll stop, sure. I only talk that way to show off. What a high ideal! As though cursing were an accomplishment. Now I shall write you a note of admission to the dormitory. Go there at once, and remember that you are here on probation, on trial. Were not your mother on the way to Europe, I doubt whether I should receive you at all. I say, how in the world did you get back? Asked Eddie Devereux early the next morning, catching Ethelrod's arm as the two came out of the washroom. I walked back, was the smart answer. I told you fellows I was going to fool you a little bit before I left. And do you mean to say that you got up that plan of running away just for the sake of fooling me and Earl Merriweather? That's just about the size of it. And what did you do with that piece of rope? You cut off about 20 feet of it. I want it back. That was part of a joke, too. You needn't get mad. You fellows had your fun out of me, and now I'm getting even with you. You can't fool this chicken. Ed's vanity was hurt more than he liked to confess, even to himself. He was a quick-witted youngster and knew it. To be thus taken by greenhorns was a real subject of mortification to him. He began to suspect that there was in the newcomer more than he had given him credit for. You may remember, darling, that I lent you 75 cents to help you run away. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. And I said you might keep it provided you did not come back to college. That's so. Now you're back, and I'll be glad to get that money. What? All of it? Certainly. Will you let me off if I pay you 20 cents? Not much. It's 30 cents on the dollar. I want that money, every cent of it. Come on, Preston. Preston looked concerned for a moment. Suddenly his face brightened. Look here, Devereux, that money was a part of the joke. Suppose it was? Well, just this. I'm not going to spoil the joke. It's too good. I'd like to pay you, but I can't. Your jokes are pretty expensive ones, darling. No, sir, you just pay me back that money. I wouldn't spoil such a joke for twice that amount, protested Ethelrod, who was now speaking with extreme animation. Do you mean to say that you don't intend to return me my money? Ethelrod's face grew troubled, and he took a moment's thought. Suddenly his face brightened, and he said, with no attempt to conceal an expression of triumph, I'll pay it if the president allows the debt. There was no doubt that Ethelrod possessed a large store of low cunning. He had outwitted Devereux, but he had outwitted him on grounds with which Ed, to his credit, be it said, was utterly unfamiliar. With a hoarse laugh and slapping his hand over his vest pocket, Ethelrod walked off, leaving Devereux quite vexed. But the little lad's sense of humor soon came to his rescue. Aside from the incidental meanness, the joke was not bad. Besides, turnabout is fair play. Ethelrod had made him a return in kind, and as for the money, Ed resolved to let the claim go. He also resolved to keep a sharp eye on the borrower. Before morning's prayers, accordingly, he summoned Earl and Roger, and told them of his interview with the darling. He's got the joke on us, said Earl, and I suppose I'm out 50 or 60 cents too. There's something strange about the whole affair, mused Roger. It may be that he plotted this trick on us, but if he did, then he is a magnificent actor. Somehow I can't bring myself to believe that he had no intention of running away last night. As for me, said Eddie frankly, I can't want to believe it. It's terrible to think I've been made a fool of by a chap like that, but it looks pretty clear against us. If he were to tell his story to the boys in the yard, I don't think there's a fellow who wouldn't believe it. I wonder how he got back, and how he accounted for his absence. I lay awake till 10 o'clock, said Earl, and he didn't come to the dormitory up to that time. The first I saw of him was this morning, when he jumped out of bed looking jollier than he has looked since he came here. Ethelrod Preston is a conundrum, said Eddie, and he needs studying. It seems to me that he ought not to be in this college at all. Me too, assented Haynes. In the meantime, we can wait till he learns more. Yes, added Earl, and in the meantime, too, it wouldn't be bad to suspend judgment. That's just what I'm doing, returned Devereux. I'm suspending judgment as hard as I can. By the way, Earl, what did the prefect ask you in the dormitory last night? He asked me whether I knew anything about Preston's whereabouts, and I told him that Preston had run away, and that he was just about to go off on the train, which was heard whistling while he was speaking to me. Did Mr. Raymond suspect that you had anything to do with him running away? He didn't ask me whether I had anything to do with it, responded Earl, in a manner so reticent that Ed resolved at once to probe further. But didn't you tell him something? Not about you, Ed or Haynes. There, it's just what I expected, cried Ed triumphantly. You've told on yourself, now haven't you? The fact is, returned Earl with blushing uneasiness, I simply said I had helped Ethelrod off. What an elegant clam you would make, Earl. It is as hard to get information out of you sometimes as sense out of a clothesline. I see your little plan. You want to take all the blame on yourself and save me. Me too, added Roger. Oh, you had nothing particular to do with it, Roger. You played quite second fiddle. But if it had not been for me, Earl wouldn't have let Ethelrod go at all. If anyone is to blame, it is I. Not at all, said Earl. I started him with the idea, and it seems to me that I am responsible one. And even supposing you hadn't as much to do with it as I had, Ed, still, I didn't say that I was alone in the matter. I simply said that I had helped. I'm on the blacklist anyhow, just at present, and a little thing like that won't change my position on the way, or the one way or the other. At the beginning of the morning studies, the vice president entered the junior student study hall and made a few remarks upon Ethelrod's running away and subsequent repentance. He informed the boys that Ethelrod, owing to a particular combination of circumstances, had been allowed to return, but on probation. He concluded thus: I am sorry to say that one of the lead boys of the junior division has actually abated the newcomer in his foolish notion. As the one who assisted him has confessed on himself, I shall take no action, but I cannot refrain from expressing my regret publicly that he should thus lend his countenance to conduct which is far worse than any ordinary breach of discipline. The boy who helps another to run away from school assumes a serious responsibility. Earl hung his head, and his face was suffered with blushes. It was the third public reprehension of his college course, and they had all three fallen within 48 hours of each other. Eddie Devereux was hardly less concerned. He knew that, through an act of friendship, Earl had laid himself open to this public rebuke. Before class, Eddie was at the prefect of discipline's room. You were talking about Earl this morning, Father, when you spoke of the leading boy that had helped the darling, I mean Ethelrod, to run away. That is true, Ed. What about it? But he wasn't to blame, Father. It was my fault. Earl had a scruple because the first time he met Ethelrod, he had made a remark against the college. He thought this remark was the cause of Ethelrod's wanting to run away, but I settled the scruple for him. I said that it would be a good thing for the college if Ethelrod were to get out. It's an odd sort of a fellow he is, and does not seem to fit in here. So I persuaded Earl to let him go, and it was I, father, that engineered the whole thing. Of course, Earl helped, but I was the leader, and Earl was simply following my plans. Last night Earl told the prefect that he helped Ethelrod off just in order to get me out of trouble. I am pleased to hear your side of the story, Eddie, but how could you bring yourself to help a boy run away? You know that is a serious matter. Devereux then explained his reason for taking this action, much in the same way as he set them forth before Earl. While secretly amused, Father Howard was pleased by the explanation. Whatever he might think of the reasoning, he felt sure, at all events, that Earl and Ed had acted with some regard to the promptings of their conscience. "Thank you for speaking to me about this," said Father Howard, when Ed had come to an end. "It relieves me very much to know that in helping Ethelrod off, there was nothing of the weakness in human respect and disregard for consciousness which one naturally expects in such things. I no longer look upon Earl's actions in the same way, and I wish you would tell Earl so. As for yourself, I forgive you too, only please don't help runaways any more. And now," continued Father Howard, "I have a word to say about Ethelrod Preston. For what you have said, I gather that yourself and Earl, and many of the boys, do not look upon him as a fit student for Henryton College. There were reasons for your thinking so yesterday, but it is well to know that Ethelrod came here in a state of rebellion. He was not himself for the time of his entrance till he ran away. On reaching the railroad station last night, it seems that he entered into himself. Then, of his own free will, he came back here, and after apologizing for his previous conduct, he made very satisfactory promises to the president of the college. And I ask you, in turn, will ask Earl and others of the boys to give the newcomer another chance. Don't condemn him prematurely. Show him a little kindness, if you can." "All right, sir," answered Eddie. "We'll give him a fair chance. And, Eddie, kindly send Earl here. I wish to smooth over as much as possible the little misunderstanding of this morning." "All right, father. I thank you very much." As Devereux left the room, he wore a broad grin. First, he had vindicated Earl. Secondly, it struck him as a fit theme for smiling that the boy who had made such satisfactory promises of behavior before going to bed should begin the new day by lying and by repudiating his honest debts. So he did run away after all. I wonder what brought him back. Maybe he came back because he entered into himself, but it's pretty hard for me to believe that. I'd give $1 to know the real reason why he came back. And if Eddie had known the real reason for Ethelrod's return, this story would be finished in very short order indeed.